Hello, OT friends, and welcome to the Uncommon OT series. I'm Patricia Modis, and I'm your host, a Filipino-American, native New Yorker, currently based in Los Angeles, bulldog mama, and an uncommon occupational therapist myself for the past 22 years. On this podcast, you will hear me proudly feature the unique careers of occupational therapy practitioners working in non-traditional and role-emerging practice areas, settings where OT is uncommon. I invite you to receive a dose of OT inspiration, to learn, to think outside of the box, and to be energized and motivated to follow in these unconventional paths. Happy listening! Before we begin this episode, I want to extend a special thanks to Picmonic, our sponsor. If you are an OT or OTA student looking for an excellent learning resource and study aid, Picmonic might be for you. Whether you're studying for your classes or getting ready for the NBCOT exam, it is a visual mnemonic learning tool that has been research proven to increase retention and help students ace their exams. It uses audio-visual learning and intelligence-based repetition algorithms to help with long-term retention while studying. If you're interested in trying it for yourself, sign up today using the link in the show notes or using the code TRANSITIONSOT to score a discount of 20% off your Picmonic membership. Welcome back, OT friends. Today, I'd like to welcome my fellow Filipino occupational therapists to the podcast. Today, we have Dr. Mike C., Dr. Roy, Charles Pineda, and Dr. Caroline Fischl joining us. They're here to talk about their new book titled Occupational Therapy in the Philippines: Theory, Practice, and Stories. So welcome to the podcast, everybody.
Thank you
Hello.
for having us.
Yes.
You're welcome. I'm super excited. First time ever that I have three amazing fellow Pinoy occupational therapists on the show. So I'm extra proud Pinoy today. And I'm really looking forward to delving into the book, what was behind it, and what motivated you to kind of come together to put this publication together and to have it for us. So I'm excited to talk about that. But as usual, before we delve into all of that, would you mind getting us started by telling us a little bit about yourself? Maybe a little bit about your OT background and your OT beginnings.
Yeah, so for the listeners, I'm Michael, and I am a Filipino occupational therapist. I started after finishing OT school, I started working as a pediatric occupational therapist in private practice, and I did that for 6 years in different private practices, also in the community. And then while doing clinical practice, I started doing a master's in health professions education, which actually introduced me to the world of teaching. And that really piqued my interest. So I transitioned slowly from being a clinician to doing part-time supervision work for students, and then eventually getting into classroom teaching. And then it went on and on. And as you know, when you are in education, there's this um, expectation that you study to get higher degrees. That's why after teaching for 4 to 5 years, I was given an opportunity to do a PhD to further my education. And that's why I was also introduced to research and to where I am now. So that's a brief background. Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
I guess it's my turn. It's my turn. Yeah,
Hi, Roy.
so hi. Yeah, nice to meet you, Patricia. Yes, so I'm also an occupational therapy from the Philippines, and I was educated in the Philippines. Immediately after my graduation, I went into hospital practice. It's a tertiary hospital where I provided occupational therapy services for a wide range of population, so from kids to adults, to older adults, mostly in the physical rehabilitation practice. And then I got a scholarship to study in Europe, in Belgium specifically, where I did my master's in adapted physical activity. It's a general degree where you are able to learn how to bring people of various levels of abilities, capacities, and resources to achieve more active lifestyles. Because as you know, people with disabilities tend to live a more sedentary lifestyle, which kind of
Mm-hmm.
brings more morbidities to them. And so we endeavor to bring to them opportunities for moving and being in the community, but also opening up possibilities for a lot of people to not just do sports, for example, for leisure, but also going as sports as their primary profession. So
Like
athletes, elite
athletes,
athletes
yeah.
going to the
Mm-hmm.
Paralympics, which eventually led to my PhD degree in biomedical science, where I did Paralympic research for people, for elite athletes with intellectual disability. So now
Well,
so now I'm working with the non-government organization who's partnered with the Flemish Sports Agency. And I'm quite happy in the position because I'm a researcher at heart. And through my work with the organization, I'm closely able to enact some policies and programs that help people with disabilities or people who are disadvantaged in general to have equal opportunities for sports and participation in leisure activities.
yeah, fascinating. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
Hi, Caroline.
Yes, thank you for the invitation to your
Oh,
podcast.
you're very welcome.
Yes. My background, I studied occupational therapy in the Philippines, and just right after I was working in the clinics, in a private clinic for children. Um, a few months after, I was in community-based rehabilitation, and teaching, and and then I was also doing like private practice, home care, um, yeah, stroke rehab, and everything.
A
No,
little bit of everything.
it's a little bit of everything. I was teaching at the same time, so it's just like from there, I got the possibility to study, take a master's in ergonomics, which I did. It was in Sweden. And I were taught again in the Philippines and then went back to Sweden and did my master's in occupational therapy. And that got me into teaching in Sweden and continued with my PhD about older people and digital technologies. And yeah, so now I'm teaching basically and doing some research, and I manage the master's programs at my university. And I'm
Fascinating.
also active in the European network of occupational therapy in higher education. And that's where I am.
Fascinating. Yeah, I'm just fascinated. That's the word that keeps popping into my mind. Um, Here you are, all Filipinos studying occupational therapy in the Philippines, and I'm just blown away by where our profession has taken your careers. Dr. Mike, you're in Zurich, Roy, you're in Belgium, Caroline, you're over there in Sweden. I mean, even different parts of Europe. And your paths there were also very different, but somehow you came together. You came together for this project. It's a good way to kind of segue into your book. What brought you all together for this project?
What motivated you to come together for this project?
Shall I start the story?
Yes.
Yes, Mike.
Yes.
I think Caroline and Roy will just continue the story. Anyway, our book is all about stories. So, I think the idea started in 2019, 2020. I think it was pre-pandemic, and the three of us in that in on those during those years were either finishing off the PhD or are already finished, just freshly minted PhD students. And I think at that time, this was the time when more Filipino OTs are obtaining a high degree on having a PhD, and consequently, research in OT have started to flourish at that
Yes.
time. And so Roy and I, we worked together in an OT school in the Philippines before, and even though we parted ways, I was in Japan, he was in Belgium, and I went back to the Philippines. We still kept in contact, constant communication. And of course, within those intersections, we were just talking about what's happening, what can we do together, to advance occupational therapy in the Philippines. And of course, there are a lot of things that we can, but we started from what we can, which is writing
Mm.
together. And we have written journal articles together with small projects on the side. And then we thought that, I mean, if you started writing a lot, and Caroline is also writing quite some articles out of her PhD and also outside of that. And we thought that maybe we should synthesize what we have written and also what other Filipino OTs have been writing about. I mean, we have also Filipino OTs in the US who are also writing about Filipino occupations or people from different backgrounds. And I think it's time to put them all together. But we didn't know how. And Roy and I think we were in Switzerland at the time. We were
Yes.
attending a symposium at that time. And after the symposium, we went around just to relax. And then just came out the idea popped out like, hey, why don't we write a book? And we were asking that question, not knowing how and where to begin. But it was just about, yeah, taking on the challenge to really start to know and learn how to begin. And
Yeah.
then Roy and I know that the task is daunting. Writing a book is daunting. So that's why we said, who can we need another person, or we need a person who could do the job. And it was not easy to consider or to think about a person who can work really well with us, whom we also equally respect the work of. And after some time, Roy, right, after talking about the processes, we eventually decided to contact Caroline. And maybe from there, I'm gonna stop. Maybe Roy and Caroline could add, and then maybe I can continue the story later. Roy,
Okay.
do you want to add more details on how we started?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I remember it vividly. The meeting we had. It was
Mm,
it was in Jungfraujoch, Mike, at the top. They call it the top of Europe. I think that gave us clarity on what we wanted to do. Just seeing the clouds from where we were.
Yeah.
Um, so we've always, I mean, since all of us studied in the Philippines, there's always like a shared experience of having your first OT book in your second year, because that's when we have our first actual major classes in occupational therapy in the Philippines. Um, so our first OT book, it's we call it the Bible of the OT book for the Filipinos, and I mean. that's really the first time where you got to learn what occupational therapy is.
Yeah.
If I'm sure a lot of the Filipinos who's listening are at least familiar with how early Filipinos have to start choosing their bachelor's degree. I think I was 15 when I had
Yeah.
to start my application for university, and so at that time, I really had no idea what occupational therapy is. But I wanted to be in the healthcare profession. And the option was going to physical therapy and occupational therapy. But physical
Yeah.
therapy was 5 years in the Philippines, and I didn't want to
Oh,
study that long. So I picked occupational therapy for a very arbitrary reason. And only in the second year I got to understand what occupational therapy is. And that's from a book that is primarily giving examples of practice from the US because
yeah. What's the book by any chance?
it's Willard and Spackman's
It's
occupational
Backman. Okay.
therapy. Yes,
A feeling.
so it was
And Pedretti.
And
Pedretti.
Pedretti,
Okay.
yeah, and Pedretti. So that was all in back in 2005, 2006. So back then, a lot of the examples were very, American centered. I know now the more recent editions have given a more diverse examples, but back
Right.
then it was really not a lot of representation of what the different kinds of practices, the different kinds of people that you will encounter. And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of mismatch on what you read versus once you get into placement and field work. It says here you can order with Medicare and Medicaid because that's all the American
Yeah.
healthcare system is. But when you go to the Philippines, none of them is able to pay. They're all charity
Yeah.
patients. It's like, it doesn't really feel as enlightening as I thought it was. So Mike and I thought maybe it's really about time that the voice of the Filipinos come into the scene for students. And
Yes.
so I think that's the point where I think if we want to leave not necessarily a legacy but a lasting impact, something that I know our articles would have some, effect or building knowledge for every individual. But if we want to at least give some guidance or information or somewhat shape what can be learned from a young student in doing occupational therapy, then we had to do this book. And we need to, and really the mindset is to write something for Filipino occupational therapists that's written by Filipinos. So it's really
Right.
that the process was, yes, we've collaborated with many occupational therapists from all of the countries where we're from the US as well. But you need to have the experience, the background to be able to shape the knowledge and create a narrative for the book that will resonate to Filipino occupational therapists.
Yes.
And so really that's the number one criteria actually for when we were looking for the authors is that they should be Filipinos. They should have the background of Filipino. It doesn't matter whether they studied in the Philippines, but if they have the background of Filipinos, then they probably would have an understanding of what is the practice like.
Yeah. Curious if you also designed the book for practice for Filipinos, right? So there are Filipinos practicing, Filipinos writing the book, but
Yes.
is it also designed to address the Filipino patient client community?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. Because it would be nice to have the book that would be useful for occupational therapy practice in the Philippines. But as you know, we Filipinos are all over the world. So
Yeah.
it would that we wish and we're hoping that the book would have some sort of like a enlighten occupational therapists wherever you're coming from. If you are providing service to a client who has a Filipino heritage, who has a Filipino background.
Yes.
You want to add
Love
more,
it.
Caroline?
Well, I wasn't their schoolmate, or I didn't study occupational therapy at the same time as them. and I met Mike when he was already a clinical supervisor, and I was a teacher in Sweden, and we were doing a teacher exchange with
Mm.
the school he was in there. So we met there for the first time, but we really caught up after during the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
and he invited me to a podcast, and we started chatting after that one, and uh, basically our circle is we knew people. It's a small world. So we
Yeah.
knew some people, and we had people in common.
Yes.
And before I left the Philippines, I wrote an article about using Filipino terminology in occupational therapy, and saying in that piece that we really need something for occupational therapists because we're explaining ourselves to our patients in English.
Yeah.
And when it's not really clear, it's not very clear for them what occupational therapy is. So I wrote that piece, and that went around and reached Mike and Roy somehow. And that's why I think you invited me for this piece. That was
Yeah.
the beginning of it.
Yeah,
Mm,
I think yeah, you're right. It's true your works, and I think I also before meeting Caroline in person or on Zoom, I was already reading her work for my PhD. It's
Okay.
it's through reading each other's articles
Yeah.
that we get connected, and I think that paper from the Philippine Journal of Linguistics, is
linguistics.
that correct? Kind of inspired us and it was published in 2005,
Six, I
was it
think, 6 or 7.
6? And then Roy and I were just thinking like, hey, this needs to be the story is needs to be continued from this journal article. I think we need to step a little bit. I mean, we need to step up.
Yeah.
And so we invited Caroline, and we are actually quite, Roy and I were not expecting anything from Caroline. I know she's very busy at that time, but you're already finished with your PhD at the time, right, Caroline?
Yes, yes.
But I
I
can imagine how busy you were. And when we contacted you, I remember you were just very positive about the idea. So that's why we came all three together to do it.
Incredible. I mean, it took some time, it sounds like, and again, knowing about each other's work, right? To be able to realize, okay, this person can contribute to what we're trying to do. This might be a good time for me to ask you to tell us a little bit about the book. And, maybe you can touch upon why, and maybe you have already, Roy, a little bit and Caroline, but why was it important to publish this book? Why was it important to come together for this project?
You
Yeah,
want to begin, Caroline? Let's
Yeah,
do it
maybe.
reverse. Do it
reverse.
reverse.
yeah. Well, when I was in this in the planning of the book, I really wanted to be in the future. I wanted I've been living away from home, but there's a reason why there's like I have a vision of occupational therapy in the Philippines, how I would like it to be. And it's I wanted to write it. So it's that one that I said I really want to be part of. And I think for me, it was also that having seen another practice of occupational therapy and seeing what it was missing in the Philippines,
Yeah.
I just wanted to put some input in it. So I just wanted to highlight. It's not. I cannot say it's. It's different. I say it's different.
Mm-hmm.
And But I mean, we talk about ethics, and that's common for, and those are the things that should be in. The understanding of people should be in there, and it's different people. So this understanding of Filipinos, it's written, but not written in occupational therapy literature in the
Yeah,
Philippines. And that's really nice to have. The
yes,
understanding of occupations, that has to be highlighted because it's different. And I really like how the book turned out. Really.
Yeah,
So
Me
yeah.
it's
too, me
can't wait
too.
to get
Same for
my
me.
hands on it, but I have to wait.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
a
Uh,
little
still
bit
more
more,
months.
a little bit
yes,
more.
a little bit
Yeah,
more.
yeah.
yeah.
Maybe
But thank
I
you
can.
for sharing that part. Sounds like it's a it's really a project that's close to your heart, right? And I love how you talked about having an influence. That's so empowering when I heard you say that. I loved that you've taken that ownership to influence our, fellow practitioners because we're not enough of us are taking that ownership, I believe. So it makes me so proud to hear you speak of that and to speak of it with pride, right? And now you have this like sort of tangible book and result to prove all of that.
Yeah, Roy, would you like to add about our motivation?
Why the book had to be done?
Yeah, why it has to be done.
I think one of the things that was also a motivation why we thought of pushing through it is, well, actually, it was more a barrier towards achieving or reaching the goal. I remember at some point we were discussing what can we actually write about it, because I mean all of us are not actually in the Philippines anymore.
Mm.
Uh, and And is there enough things that have been written that's available that we can synthesize for a book? I mean, for the most parts, book is just a synthesis or is a synthesis of primary research written in a more consumable form for people. And for a textbook kind of book, you want it to be readable, digestible for people who's being introduced to occupational therapy. So like occupational therapy students or even other professions who's having interest in occupational therapy. And so that was the biggest barrier, I think, when we were planning, like, so what would be the chapters? And we can have like this and sort of this topic and this topic, but do we have things to synthesize about this area? Because
Yeah.
if there's nothing to be written about, if there's nothing that has been written before, then what do we write in the book? And that's where the idea of the stories come in. Um, because I mean, I think for the longest time, and not that it's a bad thing, like we've been so visioned
Mm-hmm.
into evidence-based practice. This thing needs to have an evidence before you can do this, before you can write this. And I'm sure that has in itself that shift in practice of being evidence-based is an important, direction towards improving the service that we're providing. But sometimes it can be limiting because
Mm-hmm.
you're restricted to what you can do. And so because of the restrictions, we're less able to be creative.
Yeah.
Uh, and in such situations as us, when there's not much to be written, actually there is a lot of things that's being done. It's just that not a lot of them, or not a lot of these things are being written to a form that can be empirically, tested, evaluated, and assessed, such that it becomes consumable for people within the Philippines or outside the Philippines. So we that's the idea of, okay, so we have the idea of the theories and we want to share about the practice, but because there's not much that's written about, maybe we can pull the stories and create a medium from which these stories can be put together and serve as the evidence that people are asking for. Well, it is probably going to be at the lower end of, the evidence uh, pyramid, but they're evidence nonetheless.
Mhm.
And perhaps this can serve as an impetus for the directions of research where Filipino occupational therapists, Filipino researchers can pull from to direct where research is necessary, where research is needed. Yeah, so I think that's the idea that's why we wanted specifically not just to pull academics
Mm-hmm.
into academicians into our book.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it will be, a lot of times academe has been given a bad reputation because they become too idealistic, too out
Yeah.
of touch from what's happening. And so we really endeavored to pull people from practice, from
Yes.
even if they don't have much background with writing, with the academics, then we will pair them with
Yeah.
someone who has those skills. And I think it worked. It turned out well. I mean, personally, in my some of the chapters where I've been assigned to, it's not always easy to meet eye to eye with people whose entire career is in practice
Yeah.
versus where I am, which is really education and research.
Yeah.
But it was that exercise in the writing in the book that made us really appreciate the necessity of having these dialogue between people in the education, in research, and people in practice.
Mhm.
Yeah.
May I add something to that one? When
Yes.
I moved, like I said, I started in community-based practice. And when I left the Philippines, of course, I just heard stories, what has happened after. So all the different practices. And the way community-based practice has changed over the years. I'm so proud of that one. And I'm so happy to have that in the book because it was a different model from before when I was still there and when I was in it. But when I hear these stories from people, oh, this person has done this one and that one, it's like, yes, we have to write those down
Mhm.
because and share it with the world because
Mm-hmm.
these are the stories that are inspiring people to do a lot of nice changes and making everything much better.
Mhm.
Mm. Thanks
And
so much for sharing with us. Yeah, just why it was important to come together to write this book. Those are some really great reasons. Did you want to add something too, Dr.
I
Mike?
just
Yeah.
maybe just want to add,
Uh-huh.
I mean, what Caroline and Roy said are based on their also personal experiences and all these things. But I think in my case, I have been exposing myself to different international OTs in research and teaching and collaborating. And I think when I attended the WFOT Paris conference in 2021, that was when I learned or realized that there are a lot there that occupational therapy is plural. It's occupational therapies. And there's no one occupational therapy because having a conversation with the Brazilian OTs, for example. I had the privilege to, I think Roy and we were there with Professor Ana Malfitano from Brazil, and she kind of showed us how social occupational therapy is done, which is grounded a lot um, from a Brazilian philosopher, Paulo Freire, from Freirean approaches. And they really embrace their the culture that they have, their identity as Brazilians in informing the OT practice that they do. And that when I learned about, I don't know a lot about social occupational therapy, but when I learned about how they do OT in Brazil, in South America, it kind of um, made me step back and see how I knew occupational therapy then. And I
Mm-hmm.
realized that, wait a moment, in the Philippines, we also do a different occupational therapy. Like we do it from a different context, from a different historical beginnings, and but we also share a lot from other countries as well. But we are very unique, and I think we have to write about it. That's why I asked Roy and Caroline and the 30 other contributors with Filipino heritage to kind of, hey, we are all different, but let's all do this shared goal of writing a book.
Incredible. You talked about stories, and that's just piqued my interest and so curious. And I know I will relate to these stories. I am excited to read these stories because yeah, I'm excited to be able to relate in that way. I don't think I've ever encountered any occupational therapy literature that was so intertwined with my heritage and culture. So I'm excited to have that reaction. But can you give us a taste? Like, can you give us an example of one of those stories? Maybe a quick one, just so our listeners can I can kind of have an idea of what to expect.
I can go first.
Go ahead, Mike.
Just an
I was like
Go.
example.
thinking ahead, like,
I
spoiler
can
alert.
go. Yeah, I think it's okay to
Without
give
spoiling
teaser.
anything.
Yeah, without spoiling. I think one of the well, I co-wrote the chapter on occupational science. So it's chapter 3. I hope I'm giving chapter 3, correct. I co-wrote with Caroline, and one of the case studies or stories that we wrote there are the occupations of the Filipino domestic workers in Hong Kong, which
Okay.
is which kind of tell the story about how they do collective occupations in the Statue Square in Hong Kong every Sunday.
Yes,
And
I've actually been there.
exactly. So
Witness, yeah.
I think a lot of Filipinos, whether you're a domestic helper yourself or a domestic worker yourself, or you've been to Hong Kong as a tourist or whatever for business, I think people can relate to this. And there is a substantial storytelling from our colleague Terry Peralta Katipan, who actually did a doctoral work on this, and she kind of reframed that to tell a story about the occupations of Filipinos who are
Yes.
working abroad as domestic helpers, and I think, and she also provided us some images and photos from them. And so that was really very interesting for me. And I think when a reader, maybe a Filipino or a reader from another country, could kind of vividly see these occupations, and this is just something that I would like to kind of give an overview or a teaser for the book that we did.
Yes. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Roy or Caroline, would you like to give examples? And, again, without giving anything away.
I co-wrote the chapter on ethics, and we gave a few examples of ethical dilemmas there. So, like, for example, what happened? What some stories from clinical training, stories from practice. I don't go into detail about that one because these are the very short stories you
Okay.
might there. So, but there will be a lot of them in that, more like ethical dilemmas.
How about you, Roy? And no pressure.
Well, I think I did lead the section on most of the chapters on practice. So that those are chapters on the traditional occupational therapy practice. So that's pediatrics, geriatrics, physical rehabilitation, and mental health. And then also touching in other chapters on occupational justice or occupational therapy in disaster risk reduction and response. So because it's practice heavy, the chapters that I was organizing, there's a lot of stories coming out, obviously. And I think part of the the objectives that I wanted to make sure of that is ticked or checked by all of the other authors, the other contributors to the chapters, is that we give a mix of realities in the Philippines, because it's so easy to default into just showing the side of the Philippines that's poor and marginalized and oppressed. But
Yeah.
there's also other parts of the Philippines that's not like that. That's probably closer to the experience and practice in more developed countries.
Yeah.
And so we really wanted to showcase not just the poor, but also the more well-off. There's also chapters um, going back or showing tribute to the very globalized occupational therapy practice or globalized families of Filipinos, because you never have a Filipino family where there's not one on the family who's abroad. I mean,
Yes.
there's always someone abroad, and
True.
and so
Mm-hmm.
there's also examples of Filipino families who's a bit well off because of someone from abroad supporting the family, and how that dynamic influence occupational therapy service.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's also, like I said, the more traditional approach, the more traditional practice, but giving a lot more chapters, because the traditional approaches, the traditional practice areas, rather, like the pediatrics, and those are all squeezed together in one chapter. We wanted to give a bit more spotlight to
Yeah.
some of the practice areas where we think occupational therapy, Filipino occupational therapy should go to, because these traditional practice areas are saturated
Mm-hmm.
for the most part they are, but to get the most impact out of occupational therapy, they should go to a lot of these less popular, if I could say that,
Traditional. Yeah.
less traditional, so like
Yes.
community-based practice
Mm-hmm.
or um justice um justice practice areas,
Yeah.
and showcasing all these things, and trying to give them framework or map on how to develop practice in those areas, so that they can themselves establish practice in pockets in the community that's lacking in occupational therapists.
Yes. I am a big fan of that. That's been a big center of the work that I do here in the States, going into places, starting OT programs, working with groups who otherwise would not be working with OTs just because they're not in those settings, right?
Exactly.
So amazing. Thank you so much, everybody, for what you've shared so far. I want to switch gears a little bit now that we know what the book is about, what's inspired you to kind of come together, why it's so important to have this book, who it's for, right? Those are all really important things to highlight. Now, more, I guess, pragmatic things. Can you share with us, and this is for others who might be interested in publishing themselves or coming together and writing, something meaningful for their culture. Do you have any advice about funding matters or any of that, any of that sort.
Funding. Or,
I don't
or
know if this will
advice in
apply to
general.
anyone.
Well,
Take
I
time.
think I can start. An advice really is to first overcome your fear of doing something big, because I think
Yeah,
especially Filipinos, we are kind of afraid to put ourselves out there most of the time, or even writing a book is, although we know that we can speak and write in English very well, putting yourself out there and trying to challenge yourself is something that limits you from actually doing it. So I think overcoming that fear is the first step.
yes,
So surround yourselves with people who are like-minded and who are very encouraging and supportive. So you know, when you're more when, like the three of us, when we're doing it together, it makes it easier to do it
yeah,
together. I think that's my advice. And maybe before, maybe Caroline and Roy should be giving more advice, but I think ask people, ask around. If you don't know
yeah.
where to start, what to do, ask people who have done it, because that's what I did. I contacted a colleague who's also an OT from the UK who has recently published a book in 2021. And I just asked, how did you do it? I want to know. And she told me she was very generous to share the process, particularly like writing a book proposal. So she shared to me a sample, and that gave me an idea of how it's done. And then the rest, I had to ask for other people. And yeah, maybe Caroline and Roy could add some advice.
I
Go
remember
ahead, Caroline.
we were discussing the choice of publisher,
Yep.
and we decided to go international because we
Yep.
know that Filipino occupational therapists are not only in the Philippines, so we
Mm,
cannot use a Filipino publisher. So we
mm.
chose Repledge,
Okay,
and yeah, so we're quite happy with that one, and they gave a lot of support there.
Super.
Mm, so much
And good
support.
feedback and good feedback actually before we got accepted for a proposal and get a contract with.
nice.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, well, aside from the examples, all the ones that has already been given, I think there's also that you can embrace your own process, because as much as anyone can give you suggestions, tips, plans on how to go about things, as occupational therapists, we're used to, you know, being flexible and trying to adapt
Adapt.
things so that it fits into how we can work.
Yeah.
Uh, I remember I was very anxious in taking on the book, not because I was doubting my ability, but it was really an issue of time. That I think that was um a year before I should finish my PhD. And that was, of course, something that's different for each and everyone in where we are in our own careers, in our own paths, would tell us how well you're able to follow other examples. So, an
Hmm.
example provided by you, from, say, for example, from Mike, might not necessarily feel as helpful for you in its raw form, but you can take good pieces out of it that would apply to you. And I think that's how I worked with. And then it also really helped that sometimes it's not trying to find the best contributors, It's finding the contributors that would work best with you.
Yeah.
Because as much as we want to shy away from being honest about this, but sometimes you just don't jive with certain people, and not because they have, bad behavior. It's just sometimes it just doesn't work. Sometimes the timeline does not work for the other person. And so, and you'll be working with him for not, it's not a research article where it's just a year. We were working with each other for almost 3 years.
3 years,
For
two
almost
and a
three
half.
years. Yes, so if you do not have a good working relationship with someone for that long,
Yeah.
it will be more difficult than it already is. Beyond what it already is.
Research can take as long as 3 years, not just
That's
one.
true. That's
Ah,
true.
Yeah, yeah. And I think Roy, I just want to reinforce what Roy said. An advice really, if you want to go into writing a book or an edited book for that matter, um, it's really not getting the most talented people around, but really the
we
people.
got talented people.
I mean, not just
We
about
got
talented people, but it's also about being able to work well with them, with a shared goal of putting out the chapters and putting out the book together. And of course, we worked with a lot of talented, multi-talented authors from the Philippines.
And I
And
think, yeah, that is the key. It's because sometimes what you're thinking of good or talent is obviously it's a book, so you're thinking the most obvious that will come to mind is someone who's writing books.
who could
But
write?
Hmm.
like from what I said earlier, sometimes you need to look at this talent in multidimensionally.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe their talent is not the writing, but the
Yes.
richness of the experience. So that's why I said earlier, we took people from practice, and those are really talented people. It's just that because their talent is in practice, that's less being, they're not as known as they should be
Yeah.
because because their work is not being
There.
consumed by people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's
So
super.
yeah, it's just broaden your horizon on who can be best to contribute to your
Yes.
chapters into the book.
I'm
And just
sure
to
it was so difficult to decide.
Yeah, but just to add, we also have contributors who are actually not OTs,
Ah, okay.
but they are from different fields, but they are contributing because it can help us make the chapter or kind of analyze a certain part of the chapter. For example, we have linguists. We also have data science people who are contributing, medical doctor. We have a medical doctor. We have a physiotherapist.
Sociologist.
We have a sociologist in the team, and also a person who is a professor in Filipino
Philippine
language
studies.
and Philippine
Oh,
studies. So we have people from with different talents. To inform
yeah.
occupational therapy as well. So that was our process. And Roy was right. There's no one process. You have to embrace your own and create your own process to come up with a book.
Yeah. Sounds very OT to me. Oh my gosh. So thank you so much for all of this information. If any of our listeners were interested in getting in touch to ask you more, would it be okay if they reached out to each of you?
Yes, sure,
Yeah,
sure,
for sure.
for sure, for sure.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Thank you again for your advice. That's such solid advice. I'm sure that's really helpful to those listening. I want to thank all three of you personally. Today, my Filipina heart is so full and really overflowing with pride. I am genuine when I say I cannot wait to get my hands on this book, really kind of look at those pages, and I'm excited to be able to relate to them. So, before we end, I want you to tell us title of the book, where can we pre-order, and all of that good stuff so that our listeners can have that information.
Okay. And then if I forget anything, please feel free to add. So the book is entitled Occupational Therapy in the Philippines, Theory, Practice, and Stories, edited by myself, Michael C., Roy Charles Pineda, and Caroline Fischl. The book is going to be available for pre-order on Valentine's Day, February 14, 2025. And the shipping begins from Route Lodge on March 15. So if you do your pre-orders on this month, the shipping begins on March 15, and usually the shipping depends on where you are, or spans from 3 to 4 weeks. But we will have our official book launch in the Philippines on April 5. It's on a Saturday from 1 to 5 p.m. Philippine Standard Time. And the venue will be in the National Library of the Philippines. So for those people who are there in Manila or in the Philippines at that time, you can grab a copy because we will be having a place where they can buy the book with our signatures, because we're going to do some book signing there. And of course, on our website, which I think, Patricia, I can share you the link of the website where they
Yes.
reserve a slot to go to the book launch. And for more details about the book, there's a website from my personal website. There's all the information there, and they can just either go to the book launch to reserve a slot, because it's all for free. So you just need to reserve a slot to attend the book launch.
Oh, I wish I could attend, but we will list all of this information in our show notes, including
Yes.
links to how to pre-order for the book and how to sign
Yeah.
up for the book launch. Anything
And
else you'd like to add?
okay,
Well,
maybe
no.
Roy can add, but the book types, Roy, maybe you can
Yeah,
share.
so we have different types of books that you can order. So there's paperback, there is the hardbound, and then you can also purchase an ebook
An ebook.
ebook format. Yes.
Awesome.
I don't know if it's already able to share, but Mike, you can tell me. But we are also planning to do some mini book launches in the US. So Patricia, maybe we could
Yeah,
meet you there.
please. I would love that.
Definitely in California, because we know there's a big Filipino community there.
Yeah.
That might be, we're not yet sure of the date yet, but we will definitely, it's probably going to be towards the end of the year. But once we know exact dates, and we will definitely share it with you.
Thank you so much. I would love that. I would absolutely love that. Any last parting words, Caroline, that you'd like to add?
I just want to say thank you so much for this invitation to your podcast. And I'm very happy to be here to talk about the book.
It is absolutely my pleasure. I want to thank all of you again for collaborating, right? For working together, for then sharing your work with us and my listeners on this podcast. And for myself, thank you for writing this book for me. I feel like it's designed exactly for somebody like me, and it's going to help guide my professional practice. Super excited to get to these pages. I look forward to hearing more about how the book launch goes, and hopefully to meet all of you when you come to Los Angeles.
Yes, thank you so much.
Excited.
You're very welcome.
And that wraps up another inspiring episode of the Uncommon OT series. Connect with me at www.transitionsot.com. And don't forget to sign up to be part of the Transitions OT community. By doing so, you'll receive my latest compiled list of uncommon OT practice settings, the latest news on mentoring offerings, uncommon OT live events, non-traditional OT resources, and more. You may also follow me on my social media pages on Instagram and LinkedIn. And if you love this episode, head on over to Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, and Google Podcasts to follow, rate, and leave a review. I also ask you to consider pledging your support to my Passion Podcast project by being a patron on Patreon. It is very much appreciated. Sending big OT love. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.